There is a specific error your mind makes the moment a day goes bad, and it has a name, and it was measured. In 1985, two researchers named Arcus and Bloomer described the sunk cost effect, the human tendency to keep pouring money, effort, or time into something only because you already spent so much on it. That is the trap. Not the wasted morning. The trap is what you decide about the afternoon. You know the feeling. It is 2 in the afternoon, or 4, or later. You meant to start at 9. You didn't. And somewhere in the last few hours, a quiet verdict formed in your chest. This day is already gone, so I may as well let the rest of it go too. That sentence feels like honesty. It feels like accepting reality. It is neither. Because here is what Arcus and Bloomer actually showed. The hours you already lost are gone no matter what you do next. They are unrecoverable. Nothing you choose in the next 10 seconds can bring back the morning. So a rational mind would treat the morning as irrelevant to the afternoon. But your mind doesn't. It reaches backward, grabs the loss, and lets it decide the future. I already wasted the day, so I might as well waste the rest, is not logic. It is the sunk cost fallacy, wearing the mask of self-awareness. So the whole reset starts with one move, and it is smaller than you think. You do not need to redeem the day. You need to stop letting a dead loss vote on a live decision. The morning is spent. Fine. The only real question left is what the remaining block is worth, and that question has nothing to do with what came before it. But there is a second thing running underneath all of this, and it is happening in your body, not your calendar. Sarah, you dug into this one. When a task makes us feel bad, why does avoiding it feel so good?
Yeah, so here is the part nobody tells you. Avoiding a task was never about being lazy. It is mood repair. Back in 2013, Sirois and Peichel showed that when a task makes you anxious or ashamed, dodging it hands you a small, instant hit of relief. You scroll, you open the fridge, you start another episode, and the bad feeling goes quiet for a second. The task does not shrink, but the dread does, and that is the cruel part, Tom, because it feeds on itself. Every hour you avoid, the shame gets heavier, so the task feels more loaded, so ducking it gives an even bigger hit. It is a loop, and the loop is chemical, not moral.
Right, so you are not a weak person having a lazy day. You are a normal person caught in a spiral that was built to catch you, and that tells you exactly where to cut in. Not with willpower, with the loop. The first thing a reset does is not produce anything. It ends the bleeding. Whatever is feeding you those little hits of relief right now, the phone, the bed, the 6th tab, you move it out of arm's reach before you ask yourself for a single unit of work. You cannot out-discipline a mood repair machine while the machine is still switched on, so you switch it off first. That is step 0, and skipping it is why most reset attempts die in 90 seconds. Now, the loudest myth about fresh starts is that they belong to the calendar. New year, new Monday, first of the month, and there is real research underneath that instinct. In 2014, Dye, Milkman, and Rees named the fresh start effect. They watched Google searches for the word diet, gym visits, and people committing to goals, and they found the same pattern everywhere. Aspirational behavior spikes right after a temporal landmark. The start of a new week, a new month, a new semester, a birthday. Here is why that happens, and here is where it becomes useful to you at 2 in the afternoon on an ordinary Tuesday. A landmark works because it draws a line. It lets the mind file the old flawed self on one side and the new attempt on the other. The imperfect version of you, the one who overslept, who missed the deadline, who has been a mess for 6 hours, gets left behind the line. The Fresh Start research found that landmarks help people separate who they are trying to be now from every imperfect thing they did before. That separation is the whole mechanism. The date is just the most obvious way to draw the line. And a year later, in 2015, the same researchers put that mechanism in the title of a paper, "Put Your Imperfections Behind You." That is not a slogan, it is the finding. A landmark works precisely because it lets you file the flawed past on the far side of a line and pursue the goal from a clean position, as if the failures belong to someone you used to be. The past does not change, your relationship to it does, and that shift is enough to move behavior. So you do not have to wait for midnight. You do not have to wait for Monday. The line is not a property of the calendar, it is a property of the break, and a break is something you can manufacture on purpose, right now, in the room you are sitting in. Here I have to be honest with you about the evidence, because it matters. A shower does not have the same proven track record as a real birthday. Moving to a different room is not a peer-reviewed protocol. What we know is that natural landmarks create the mental break, and what we are doing is borrowing that logic. So you take the principle and build a crude version of it by hand. You get up and change rooms, you shower, you clear the desk down to nothing. Not because a clean desk is magic, but because your body needs a visible, physical event that says the previous episode is over and a new one is starting. You are drawing the line with your hands instead of the clock. But there is one more thing to put down before you start, and it is the heaviest thing you are carrying, and it works in a way that feels backwards. Peter, this is the strange one. What is actually keeping people stuck?
Shame. That is it. In 2010, Wohl, Peichel, and Bennett studied students who put off studying for an exam, the ones who forgave themselves for that procrastination, who set the shame down, procrastinated less before the next exam. Read that again. Self-forgiveness did not make them soft. It made them start. Because the shame was the fuel, Tom. Think back to that loop. The worse you feel about a task, the more you need to avoid it. So forgiving yourself is not pretending the morning did not happen. It is cutting the wire between the failure and the fear, just enough that you can walk toward the thing instead of away from it.
So the machine is off, the line is drawn, the shame is set down. What do you actually do with the block that's left? Here the research gets very practical and very gentle, and the gentleness is the point. There is a clinical approach called behavioral activation, used by the NHS, and its core move is almost insultingly simple. When your mood and energy are low, you do not schedule the hard, heroic thing. You schedule a small, doable thing, and you let the doing come before the feeling. That order is the whole secret. You keep waiting to feel ready before you start. Behavioral activation says that is backwards. Contact with a small, rewarding, or mastery-building activity is what lifts the mood, not the other way around. So you pick the smallest real action that produces one piece of visible evidence that you exist, and you are moving. Because behavioral activation values exactly that, activities that leave proof of action behind them, not a feeling of progress, a visible output you can point at. And to make sure you actually start, you use one more tool, and it is the most reliable one in the whole field. In 2006, Gollwitzer and Sheeran reviewed the research on implementation intentions, if-then plans. The structure is dead simple. You connect a specific situation to a specific response, in advance. If this happens, then I do that. Plans built that way get carried out far more reliably than plans that are just good intentions. So you write your reset as an if-then, out loud or on paper. If I notice it is 5 in the afternoon and the day is sliding, then I put the phone in another room and start one block. You are not hoping to feel motivated at 5. You are pre-deciding what the trigger is and what the response is, so that when the moment comes, there is no negotiation left to lose. The decision was already made by a calmer version of you. Give that block a container. Call it 90 minutes, or call it 40, and I want to be straight with you. 90 minutes is not a scientifically optimal reset dose. Nobody proved that number. It is just a humane, finite fence around the work, so the task stops feeling like an infinite debt and starts feeling like a room with a door. Inside that fence, you are not trying to reclaim the whole day. You are trying to leave one honest mark on it. And when you choose what goes in the block, do not choose by importance, choose by damage. This is the sunk cost lesson turned into a tool. Because the past hours do not get a vote, the right question is not, what is the most important thing I failed to do today? It is, what one thing, done now, makes tomorrow easier. Pick the task that reduces future cost, the email whose silence is quietly getting worse, the one prep step that turns tomorrow morning from a cliff into a stair, which points at the single most valuable thing you can do in a rescued block, and almost nobody does it. You spend the last few minutes writing down tomorrow's first step, not tomorrow's whole plan. The first physical action, because an if-then plan is only as good as how specific its cue is, and be productive tomorrow has no cue at all. Open the document and write the first sentence has a cue you can obey half asleep. You are handing tomorrow you a start that is already loaded and pointed. And if the wasted day left real wreckage, a message you owe, a thing you dropped on someone else, there is one clean move that ends more avoidance than any amount of work. You send a single, accurate, overdue message, not a paragraph of apology, not a story, one true, bounded sentence that removes the ambiguity you have been hiding from. Half of what makes an overdue task unbearable is not the task, it is the fog of not knowing how bad it is. You clear the fog with one honest line, and the weight it lifts is out of all proportion to the effort. Now, some days are not a discipline problem, and pretending they are is its own kind of cruelty. If you barely slept, the reset does not get to demand high cognition heroics, because fatigue genuinely changes what is realistically doable, and behavioral activation knows that. The whole method scales the task down to meet the low state, not the other way around. If the day drowned in your phone, you kill the source of the mood repair before the block, not during it. If you were frozen by too many choices, you choose by damage reduction and let the smallest fire decide. The reset bends to the day you actually had, and there is a harder honesty underneath all of this. If your days keep vanishing, not once, but again and again, to depression or burnout or something you cannot name, then a reset block is not the answer, and no video is. That is not a self-control problem you scroll your way out of. That is a signal to get real support, and reaching for it is the opposite of weakness. Behavioral activation itself lives inside actual treatment for a reason. Some resets need another person in the room. But for the ordinary wasted day, the one that is just a bad start dragging its shadow over good hours, here is the thing you came for, and it is smaller and stranger than the internet promised. You were never required to save the day. You were only ever asked to stop punishing the afternoon for the morning's mistakes. A day is allowed to be inconsistent. The earlier hours being wasted does not, in any rational sense, require the later ones to be. The loss is real, and the loss is over, and it does not get to reach forward and take anything else unless you let it. So the reset was never about redemption. It was about refusing to let a dead loss decide a living one. You draw the line by hand. You set the shame down. You leave one honest mark, and you let the rest of the day be exactly what it is. Not saved, not ruined, just still yours.